one prone to great exaggerations. But this is going to change your entire perspective on programming. Now, the last time I said something like that, it was where we went from making programs that were very linear, where we could perhaps just divide it up into 4 little sections. Maybe there's some kind of print statement up here, followed by some kind of input that we would get from the user, represented with just an I in key, some kind of calculation, and then some sort of result, all right? So that was how we started off by writing programs. Then I showed us how we could go ahead and add in the conditional structures, which, let's clear that out, which then made it that we could now take this input and divide it based on certain properties, thus changing the flow of our program. This was called a control structure, and the particular type of control structure that it was a conditional structure. It was represented with if, elif, meaning else if, but written just as elif, or else. Those are the 3 main things we saw. Now, from there, there is another kind of level we can do. Just make sure that you've gone through and understood how conditionals work before you jump into this next part. This next part is called a function. And to start it off, I'm going to draw 2 lines here. Just expand. There we go. Alright, so just 2 lines there. And I'm going to write the word main up here, maybe in a smaller typesetting. And over here, I'm going to write describe number. Now, those of you who are already familiar with other programming languages, you might be seeing main and think that we're going to make a main method or a main function. That is not the case here. We will not have one. Instead, this is what so you'll see how we actually do it. It's just basically going to be that this won't be in a function, and this will. If you are very new to programming and that did not quite make sense to you, hopefully this will. So underneath main, we're going to first describe a program where, given a certain number, we're going to tell the user if it's negative, positive, or 0. And all of that stuff is going to be taking place over here in a repeatable code segment called a function. Let's start off over in main. Main is going to look like our first program diagram, where it's going to take in some kind of input. It's going to perform some kind of calculation, and then lastly, it's going to have some kind of result. It might, anyway. In reality, we're not going to do too much with this part just yet. Instead, well, eventually we will, so I'll leave that in. This part, though, the calculation, I'm going to write describe number, and put an X in there. Resize it so it actually fits. Adjust it. There we go. And you'll notice that's the same phrase with the underscore as this one is, because this is what's called a function call, C-A-L-L. And this function call is going to call this this function and get its functionality. So watch this. Under describe number, I'm going to start drawing a line. And for this one, it's going to, instead of asking for any input, it's going to take the input it was given by this one over here. So this is getting X from the user, and then it's giving it this function where it's then going to decide based on what X is. It's going to decide, is it negative, positive, or 0? And then, depending on which one it is, it'll have a different return. That's going to be hard to read. So it's going to have a different return depending on what it is. Because depending on what it is, we either want to say, oh, your number is negative, oh, your number is positive, or oh, your number is 0. Later, when you do the absolute value lab, you're going to want to have this return. But we won't jump into just using the return just yet. Instead, we will start by just simply building this part and this part. But basically, get this, that we are going to now have almost like organs in our program, where it's going to have these pieces called functions that perform operations on their own and can be used by the other pieces of the program. This is a very useful way of programming, and while for this example it's going to be pretty unnecessary, for all the later examples it will be very useful to you. Alright, so let's go and check this out, what it looks like in code.